If the Aztecs were known for one thing, it's human sacrifice. We imagine men being dragged by their hair up the temple steps of the Templo Mayor before having their hearts cut out by an obsidian blade. These temple sacrifices were a staple in Aztec culture, but their gods demanded blood in more ways than that. Prisoners were taken as part of the Flower Wars every year for sacrifice. As many as 20,000 were killed annually. The temple sacrifice were the end result for many of these deaths, but the other ways they did it were even more haunting. Today I'm going to share with you 5 different ways that the Aztecs sacrificed their victims, each one more brutal than the next. Welcome to Dates and Dead Guys. If I had to be sacrificed by the Aztecs, the best way would take place in their 5th month, Toxcatl. It was to honor the god Tezcatlipoca. This god created one version of the world. In another version, he destroyed it. The Aztec gods were complicated figures, but his feast was the most important on the Aztec calendar, and his sacrifice was the most special. In late April, after the ceremony from the previous year, a man would be chosen from the Aztec prisoners. He would be young and strong, lean and handsome. He wouldn't have visible scars or wrinkles, and he would have long hair down to his waist. He was supposed to be beautiful and flawless. For a year, he would be treated as the living embodiment of the god. He would be dressed in expensive jewelry. He would have attendants that cared for him. He would be taught to dance, sing, and play the flute. Everywhere he went for the entire year, he was treated like a god, literally worshipped by the citizens of the city. For most of the year, he was also abstinent. But 20 days before the ceremony, that would end, when he would be wed to 4 very attractive women to have relations. His abstinence, followed by marriage, was representative of the end of the drought and the coming fertility. He was forced to go without, before having all he could ever want. In this final month, his hair would be cut to look like a warrior, and for 5 days before the sacrifice, he would be constantly accompanied by Aztec leaders. The whole year he was honored and respected. On his final day, the day of the sacrifice, he would enter the ceremonial center of Tenochtitlan. There he would stand before the Templo Mayor. His wives would leave him, and alone he would climb the steps of the temple. He would play the flutes that he was given throughout the year, occasionally shattering them as he advanced. This was all done voluntarily. It was part of the ritual. The captive knew that he was going to be sacrificed, but because he worshipped the same gods as his captors, this was an honor. At the top of the pyramid, Aztec priests would be waiting for him, and in traditional temple fashion, they would throw him onto a sacrificial stone. He would be held down by his limbs and neck, and with an obsidian blade, they would cut out his heart. In most temple sacrifices, his body would be thrown down the steep steps, covering them with blood, but he was treated with more reverence. His body was carefully carried down, so that it remained perfect. For a moment, at the bottom they would cut off his head, and it would be added to the skull racks. Before this year's ceremony ended, a new prisoner would be chosen to represent Tezcatlipoca for the next year, and it would start all over again. As the living embodiment of the god, just like the chosen before him, he knew his fate. Some Aztec prisoners didn't. Before we dive into our next Aztec sacrifice, let's talk about something a little less intense, like my Raycon earbuds. When I'm researching gruesome rituals like Aztec arrow sacrifice or cave entombments, Raycon's active noise cancellation keeps me locked into my audiobooks. Noise cancellation is helpful in many aspects of my life. These are my go-to earbuds. Super comfortable with gel tips that fit perfectly. They deliver top-tier audio quality that rivals big brands at half the cost. With 8 hours of playtime and a 32-hour battery, I'm always wearing them, whether I'm editing or walking in the woods. Plus, their awareness mode lets me stay alert when I really need to.
Is that a bear?
Thousands of 5-star reviews back me up. And if you don't love them, Raycon's Go Return policy has you covered. Go to buyraycon.com and use my promo code for 20% off site-wide. Brought to you by Raycon. Now, back to the sacrifices. Each iteration of sacrifice involves a brutal death at the end, although that is usually quick. For the sacrifice of Tezcatlipoca, there was a brief moment of pain at the end, but through the year, the prisoner lived a noble, respected life and was cared for. The psychological element was minimal, but that's not the case for other types of sacrifice. The killing was primarily done to male prisoners of war, but there are two notable exceptions. One later on the list, but for now I want to talk about women. Like in the month of Toxcatl, when a man took on the embodiment of a god, other ceremonies would commonly have others take on the embodiment of other gods. Women would only be sacrificed in a few of the months on the Aztec calendar, but the most horrifying one to me happened in the 11th month. It was for the god Tochi. The name means our grandmother. In this month, the drums, usually beating throughout the city, were quiet for 8 straight days. The whole city was strangely silent. A female slave, dressed like Tochi, would be marked for sacrifice. She would be paraded through the streets while women threw things at each other in mock battles. This was something that was done by men in other ceremonies. The young woman was kept in a cage to keep her from escaping, but also to keep her clean and pure. She couldn't have sex for 20 days before she was to die. The entire time, she was teased by the other women for her coming fate, but she wasn't allowed to cry. If she did, she would be beaten. To cry in this ceremony was a bad omen. In others, it would be required. She would have black makeup applied around her mouth, and the rest of her face would be painted white. Despite her tortures, she was forced to constantly smile. The stress would have been overwhelming. But then, in a moment of relief, she would be told that she was going to be spared, that instead of being killed, she would be taken to have sex with a great lord at the top of the pyramid. This was a far better option than the alternative. She would be taken out of her cage to walk to the Templo Mayor. This would be done in complete silence. Once she was at the top of the pyramid, she would see priests emerge from the temple. In that moment, I am positive that she realized that she had been lied to. She was grabbed by the priests and laid shoulder to shoulder, or back to back, on top of a priest that was laying on the sacrificial stone. All she could do is stare into the stars of the night sky as they sawed off her head. Although her soul was gone, the Aztecs were not yet done with her body. Her skin was immediately flayed, and still fresh, worn like a jacket by a young man, who would then, now as Tochi, sacrifice 4 captive men at the top of the pyramid. The physical pain of this sacrifice occurred mostly at the end, but psychologically she suffered for weeks. Other forms include a lot of both. The second month on the Aztec calendar was called the Flaying of Men. It was one of the most unique months on their calendar, and was designed to represent the renewal in the spring. It honored Zipetotec, the Flayed One. The Aztecs would take warriors, who they had captured in other provinces, and make them stand next to the skull racks in the ceremonial part of the city. A giant crowd was gathered. Kings from surrounding areas were invited to watch, as well as the Aztec public. One by one, the prisoners would be forced to compete in a mock ceremonial combat. They would be tied by the leg, waist, or neck to a massive round stone, carved specifically for the ceremony. They would be given a macchiato, the famous Aztec sword, but instead of being edged with obsidian, it was covered in feathers. Soon, 4 warriors would be sent to attack the prisoner. They had real edged weapons, and him only a feathered club. He would try to defend himself, but they would cut at his legs until he was too wounded to stand. From there, he would be dragged from the platform to a separate sacrificial stone, and like in the other sacrifices, his heart would be cut out and offered to the gods. The ceremony wasn't over there. Like the woman before, they flayed his skin, but this time it would be worn by people called the Zipiim for 20 full days. By the end of the month, it would be rotting off of them. It was supposed to represent the new life emerging from the old, or new corn emerging from the husk. The Zipiim, dressed in skin, would be attacked and made to participate in mock battles in the street. They were said to have smelled like dead dogs. and as they went around, they would beg for gifts. At the end of the month, they would discard the skins in a cave and bathe for the first time in a month before hosting a feast with their collected donations. This description is short and doesn't do the practice full justice, but I actually have an entire video dedicated to this topic. So after this one, you should check that out. This type of sacrifice would have been horrifying and extremely painful, but the next attacks the most vulnerable in the population. The Aztecs had an 18-month calendar. The first 4 months of their year took place between early February and late April. During these months, they would sacrifice children. This was done to please the rain god, Tlaloc, and to bring in the rainy season. It was important for agriculture. For the sacrifices, the first month was the most important. Children would be brought to the mountains. On the way, they would be forced to cry. Unlike in the ceremony of the woman, personifying Tochi, the tears this time were a good omen. They represented the rain. The priests would prod and beat the children to make sure they cried. But the mood was different than other sacrifices. This wasn't a celebration. It was a somber occasion, a duty that had to be done. The people would wail in despair over the death of the children, but they were needed for the rains. Without them, they would all be doomed. There is a feedback loop among civilizations that practice sacrifice. If sacrifices are done and the gods favor you, the rains come. If the sacrifice of the children appease them, you are encouraged to continue the next year. If you sacrifice and the rains don't come, well, you did something wrong. You have angered the gods by not offering something valuable enough, or having done something to upset them. To not sacrifice is out of the question. It puts the whole civilization at risk because you are not prepared to do what needs to be done. It's selfish and blasphemous. Even if you got away with it once, any bad thing in the future would be taken as punishment for your sins. So they gave Tlaloc something precious. Children. At the top of the mountain, the priests would cut the throats of the children, or drown them, extracting the heart afterward. For the 3 months that followed the first, children marked for sacrifice would be killed in the same way, until the rains finally came. This form of sacrifice was especially brutal, because it involved children as well as physical and psychological elements. But I think there's one that's worse. The order of sacrifices that I made is based entirely on what I think would have been the worst to endure. When I think about the most horrible way to die, something I do more often than I should, burning is always near the top. This last one took place in the 10th Aztec month, and it was for the god of fire. What happened to the prisoners is about what you would expect, but they had a twist that made it even more sadistic. The captives would be painted yellow to represent the fire god and be forced to dance. The hands and feet of the prisoners would be tied, and they would be thrown over the shoulder of an Aztec warrior. Then the warriors would walk around a fire, chanting as they carried the prisoners. One of the unlucky souls would be the first to be cast onto the coals. The prisoners, still on the shoulders of their captors, would be forced to watch and listen. They knew that it would soon be their time to be cast onto the coals as well. The man in the fire would writhe and scream as he burned, but he wasn't allowed to die. He would be pulled from the coals with a hook. From there, he would be dragged, smoking, to a sacrificial stone where his heart would be cut out. Each of the captives would have this happen to them. After the first had his turn, the others would either be thrown in all at once, or one at a time. To the Aztecs, sacrifice was incredibly important to their culture. Their gods demanded blood, and it was their way to appease them. Those 5, for me, are the most notable and well written about, outside of the commonly performed temple sacrifice. My list went from what I felt was the best to worst to endure. Do you agree? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching the video. Please take a moment to like and comment. It helps get the video to more people. And if you're not subscribed, I do have a goal of getting to 200,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and that would help. And as always, my Patreon is in the video description. If you are feeling generous, sign up, and I'll send you some of these for your troubles. A lot more content coming soon. Some more things on the Aztecs, some things I want to tackle on the Northern Plains tribes. If you have any more ideas, it's an excellent reason to leave a comment. Until next time.